So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the self-care series. So my name is Taylor. I am the Student Experience Officer here at MGSE. So I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we all live and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you all for coming along today, and welcome back to those who have joined in previous sessions. If you've missed any of the sessions, they are all available to watch on the MGSE YouTube channel. So this session will also be recorded and available to watch there as well. So today's session is about tips for creating a healthy headspace. And our wonderful guest speaker is Dr. Chelsea Hyde. And just a little housekeeping before I hand over to Chelsea. If I could kindly ask everyone to mute their microphones throughout the presentation. If you do have a question, just type this in the chat function. I'll be monitoring this and we can chat to Chelsea throughout the presentation. And yeah, this session is designed to be quite informative, but also interactive. So please feel free to ask questions. I encourage everyone to participate. It's a really great opportunity. So now I'll hand over to our guest speaker, Dr. Chelsea Hyde. Dr. Hyde is a practicing educational and developmental psychologist and lecturer in the education psychology at MGSE. Chelsea has over 15 years practical experience working as a psychologist within government, Catholic and independent school systems in Victoria and in Queensland. So Dr. Hyde's research is focused on building up mental health interventions in schools and capacity building of school staff. Thank you so much for coming along today, Chelsea, and I'll hand over to you now.
Great, thank you, Taylor. Thank you for inviting me to speak with everyone today. It's my pleasure to be here, and great that we can have, an interactive session. As Taylor mentioned, I'm very keen to take questions as we go today. And what I've designed is a seminar that's hopefully going to be as practical as possible for all of you. And give you the opportunity to take away some tips. So I am going to be talking about, how we can promote and have a healthy headspace today, which as a practicing psychologist very much is the bread and butter of what I do and underpins a lot of the lecturing work that I do within educational psychology at MGSE. So just to start with, I just wanted to share with you some statistics about mental health. So we know that in a general sense, younger people can be somewhat of an at-risk group. We know that at least half of mental health conditions that we are going to experience in our life will have started by the age of 14, or 75% have presented by the age of 25. So in general, each year there's around 1 in 4 young Australians or young adults that are experiencing a diagnosable condition, mental health disorder. And we also know too that as a group, they're far less likely to engage in seeking professional help. So with that in mind, I think, prevention is important, and knowing what we can do to promote our own mental health, because there are definitely steps that we can all be taking. But as you would have heard before, prevention is always better than cure. So what can we be doing right now, every day, to help bolster our resilience and our coping? When I'm working with clients, I like to talk a lot about the concept of coping and our reserves, our resources. So if you think about it in terms of a well, if a well is almost dry or at the bottom, it's the water level's getting quite low. There's not a lot of resources and reserves there for us to draw upon. So we have to, fill our well with lots of different resources and skills and strategies to support us when we need it. So the things that I'm going to share with you and chat to you about today fall within these areas or fall within these umbrellas, and I've called it Striving for 5. So I think in our everyday life and how we're moving around and how we're living, it's important to look at trying to embed some of these areas in our life to promote positive mental health. So we're going to go through each of these in detail, looking exactly at the strategies and things that we can do to help bolster our mental health. Okay, so sleep's the first one. Whenever I'm actually in my psychological work meeting with a new client, the first thing I will ask them, one of the first things I will ask them is, please tell me about your sleep. Sleep is critical to how we function and has direct connections and links with our mood. So we know that from a mental health perspective, people that are diagnosed with depression don't sleep well. And we also know that those who struggle with insomnia are at an increased risk of depression. So as you can see, the two are linked, they're entwined. So sleep is pretty critical to our mental health. So a couple of things that I want to point out there within sleep. First is sleep hygiene, and that refers to our basic practices around where we sleep and how we sleep. So things like the temperature of our bedroom. Are we too hot or are we too cold? Even in terms of our blankets or how many clothes or layers we're wearing to bed. The lightness of the room. Is your room filled with light that's going to help keep you, that will keep you awake, or is it adequately, dark so that you can get, more of an uninterrupted night's sleep? So sleep hygiene is some of those basic things that we probably don't even think about, but are definitely worth some further consideration. The second point there is around napping and building sleep pressure. Now, as Taylor mentioned at the start, my area is largely working with adolescents as a school psychologist. And if a young person has got difficulties with sleep, one of the first things I try and work with them on is getting rid of napping. Now, some of you are probably mortified to hear that. No, please don't take away my naps. But napping is really important. It can be quite detrimental, actually, if we're having sleep issues. Now, the reason that we need to, if there's sleep issues there, that we need to remove the regular napping is because it stops what we call the building up of sleep pressure. So throughout the whole day, it starts at, upon waking and our first exposure to natural light, we start building up a sleep pressure all day long, which results at the end of the day with the production of melatonin, which allows us to have a restful night's sleep. Now, if we nap, that pushes back the natural process of melatonin, creating sleepiness and us going to sleep. So it relieves that sleep pressure, which then means we've got to build it up again, which can end up in, very late sleep times or sleeping in, at the other end of the spectrum. So it's, as I said, so it's important to try and set good sleep times. Our phones are excellent actually for helping us with that now in developing sleep cycles. We can try and aim to have a sleep window every day where we're going to sleep at a similar time and waking up at a similar time as well. The next point there is screens and gaming. I think we all have heard this to different degrees, but screens before bed can be really difficult. And the reason that they are is because screens are bright and they increase our alertness. And when we're alert, our body produces dopamine, and dopamine keeps us awake and functioning. And that's not what we want when we're trying to go to sleep. Screens can also stimulate us, make our mind active, which again makes us less likely or less ready for sleep. And we can also become quite absorbed in what we're doing. I don't know about you, but sometimes I can find myself mindlessly trawling through social media or something else, and then, you know, an hour's gone by, and then I've sort of moved out of my typical sleep window, and find it then sort of hard to actually get to sleep. So for a number of reasons, you know, bright screens are not helpful to us. I just wanted to make a couple of points there too on the purpose of sleep. We know that from years of research that sleep is important to our consolidation of memories. And I'll also often talk to students about this. I think, you know, we've all had nights of cramming in our time where we stay up late the night before an important assessment to do cramming. It can actually be counterproductive because sleep has the role of consolidating those memories and that learning that's taken place. And if we deprive ourselves of sleep, then that process is not getting to happen in full. And the bottom point there is just that it has a restorative function. Our body needs to rest and replenish, so we need to give it adequate time to do that. And I can probably hear some people in their heads thinking, okay, well, how much sleep am I meant to be having? For adults, sort of, you know, 18 to, you know, 55, 60 years of age, we're looking at around 7 to 9 hours sleep a night, if you can. But, you know, that's the average. There's obviously going to be variations to that, but on average, if you can do between 7 and 9, you're putting yourself in a good position. The next aspect I wanted to talk to you about is soothe. How do we relax ourselves? What do we do to unwind? And I've categorized this into, you know, the 5 senses, because I think this is a helpful way of looking at what you are doing to help yourself relax, and to do it in a mindful and a present way. So some of the things that you might do that are relaxing in terms of sight could be just indulging in nature, viewing nature, winding down with a slow walk where you're taking in your surroundings. Or it might be that you like to draw, or perhaps get involved in doing some mindful colouring. An activity that's quiet and soothing that is engaging the sight sense. Touch is the second one. For me personally, I love nothing more than a bath, you know, if that's something that's available. So how can we enjoy, you know, that sense? It might be stroking or patting a pet, or often we hear now about beanbag pods. I saw something advertised the other day for beanbag pods, which just looked wonderful to kind of snuggle into. Weighted blankets is another thing that can be quite calming with that pressure within the blanket. Hearing, meditation. Okay, so taking time to do some quiet meditation, or listening to relaxing music, whatever works for you in terms of being soothing and having that unwinding impact. Taste. It might be something as simple as enjoying a cup of herbal tea, or if you like to cook, making yourself some nurturing food. Can be really comforting. And the final one, smell. I just enjoyed a cup of coffee myself before. That smell of coffee can be incredibly nurturing and rewarding to us. So let yourself indulge where appropriate, probably not, you know, late at night, but earlier in the day, or aromatherapy, different scented candles and essential oils. Socialize. Humans are social creatures, and we have an inherent need to belong. And research has shown us that loneliness and isolation can be significant risk factors for poor mental health outcomes. So it's indicating to us that socialising and investing in our relationships is really important. So how are you currently staying connected? I think with COVID this year, we've all been thrown into having to find different ways to connect and stay, you know, aligned with our friends and our loved ones. And for some of you, you know, that amount of online screen interaction, you know, might be quite overwhelming and might get quite fatiguing. But at the same time, it's really critical that you are still investing in those close relationships. And I know for me, interestingly, I've stopped FaceTiming people, and I've gone back to just the old, traditional phone call, just to give myself a bit of a break from the screen, but still wanting to maintain that social connection. So however it is for you that works, make sure it is a priority. Scheduling that time to have a walk with a friend, or a phone call. We gain energy from, connecting with our friends and our loved ones and people who are like-minded. It can be, quite stimulating for us. So it's really important this time more than ever to be staying connected with those around us that we really care about. Okay. So sweat, this one pretty much speaks for itself. The research is clear here. Exercise does improve our mood. Sorry if that's bad news to anyone, but it absolutely does. And there's decades of research showing that that is the case. And why is that the case? Because when we move and when we exercise, our body produces endorphins, okay? And they're happy chemicals. And endorphins relieve stress and pain. So they can actually leave us feeling quite euphoric. I don't know about some of you, but you hear about the runner's high. I don't know if any of you are runners, but at the end of a run or an intense workout, people often report that feeling of euphoria, of feeling amazing after they've done exercise. So exercise reduces our stress, and it does so by creating those endorphins. Exercise can also improve our productivity, sometimes by just stepping away, going for a run, going for a walk, yoga, workout, whatever it is that you enjoy, can help our creativity to start moving. Okay, so stepping away, doing another task, getting the heart rate going, can then result in us coming back feeling more focused, and more motivated to do the task that needs to be done. I think forcing yourself to sit there and persevere and slug it out may not always be, result in the best outcomes. The final point that I've put there is just activity scheduling. Now, what do I mean by activity scheduling? Well, when in my clinical work, when I'm working with people who say are experiencing depression, motivation for exercise is usually critically low. There's often, very low motivation to exercise. So we start small and we start in increments, and I work with those clients on activity scheduling. So times of the day where they can gradually build upon their exercise. And it might be that they make an agreement that they're going to go on a 15-minute walk, and we increase it from there. So you might find that when your motivation for exercise is really low, you might need to start building it into your schedule and your timetable. And if you can involve someone else in that exercise as well, that might also help with your motivation, because we've got that kind of cheerleader or coach there saying, come on, we agreed we were going to do this, let's get out there and get moving. So some ideas there around, how we do exercise more and why we need to be doing our exercise. And the clear reason is because it does improve our mood. Self-talk is my number 5 in the striving for 5. What is your internal critic saying? What are you saying to yourself on a daily basis? Do you have self-compassion? Often we have a lot of compassion and empathy for others, but do you have self-compassion? Do you have compassion and empathy for yourself? What is the nature of the thoughts that are running through your mind? What is your mindset like? Are you someone who sees the potential for growth, or you're very quick to put yourself down if something goes wrong? We need to try and be more aware of how we are talking to ourselves, our internal dialogue, because it can often be quite negative. It's helpful to try and evaluate, the self-talk. If we catch ourselves thinking a certain way, ask yourself, is it actually true? Is thinking that way true? Is there evidence that that's the right way to be thinking? Because often it's actually not. And putting our thoughts into perspective is important as well. And I think certainly, you know, in Melbourne, in recent weeks and months, it's been quite easy at times to lose that perspective because we sort of feel like there's sort of no end in sight and we're going through this kind of Groundhog Day existence. But trying to put things in perspective and look forward to, you know, outcomes that may be coming in the future as well can be really helpful. I think the other aspect to that is the practice of gratitude and how often we're actually stopping and looking at what's going on around us and practicing gratitude for the things that are going well, the things that we are grateful for. So I think self-talk is something that we're not necessarily always conscious of, but next time, you know, you've got a quiet moment, just have a focus on what's going on round and round in your head and what's the content of that. What is your inner critic telling you? So just before I finish, I just wanted to just make a couple of points there about, you know, when we might need to seek more support. So at times, you know, our emotions might get quite intense and it might necessitate, you know, the benefit of getting some professional help or chatting with someone to get more support. So how do we know when it might be time to perhaps look at that as an option? I think some of the things to keep in mind there is that stress and anxiety does affect everyone, and we all have good and bad days. All of us have good and bad days. However, if our sad feelings, our down feelings, or our anxiety starts to affect our everyday life in a significant way, then maybe we might need some extra help to manage that. So some of the things that we need to consider there is the impact. So how severe is your mood? Are you having, you know, really big mood swings or just sort of slight ups and downs? How severe is the impact on your mood? And even more so, the impact on your daily functioning. Are you still able to do all the tasks and things that you did previously or that you want to be able to do? So what is the impact of your mood on your daily functioning? Also, considering our routine, are there drastic changes that are happening with your sleep or your eating patterns or your exercise? Okay, so how much have you deviated from your typical routine? And again, what has been the impact of that on you? Enjoyment. Are you still enjoying the things that you used to before? Are you still gaining pleasure from those activities? And if you're not, why aren't you? Perhaps there might be things that you could be doing differently. Maybe there's been a natural move away from some of those activities, but if you're not getting any enjoyment, you need to be looking at, okay, well, what's going on here? Why am I not enjoying these things that I used to really love? And the bottom point that I've put there is just the stress tipping point. I talk a lot to students, often around exam time, about stress. Stress often gets a bad rap, but we do need a bit of stress in our life because it helps motivate us. It helps let us know that something is important. But we often talk about in psychology the inverted U curve. So we need a certain amount of stress because that's going to increase our motivation and increase our ability to, you know, be focused on, you know, working towards that goal. But if we get too much stress, then our performance goes down because the stress takes over and the body focuses only on the stress and managing with the stress, and we don't have the cognitive capacity to deal, you know, with the other tasks. So stress, with many other things in life, is about a balance, about striking the right balance. So considering too, where is your stress tipping point? If your stress levels have, you know, swung into the top end of the spectrum, then perhaps, you know, you could benefit from getting some strategies or support around how to better manage that stress load. I've just finished here with a couple of helpful websites. A lot of what I've talked to you about today, you can find extra information about those areas and those tips at these different websites. There's a lot of really practical, helpful information there, links to different apps that you can use, you know, as I mentioned earlier, to help regulate your sleep or your schedules. So they're worth having a further look at. But in terms of formal content, I think that's probably it from me, Taylor. So I'm happy to take any questions if there are any questions.
Yeah, look, that was really interesting. Thank you so much, Chelsea. If anyone does have a question, because we have a smaller group, you are welcome to just turn on your screen or unmute yourself and ask away. You can also use the reaction buttons on that bar down the bottom. You can see on my screen there, I've just put the little hand. Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Chelsea about the presentation today? Not yet. I might start and just sort of ask a quick question. Sure. Just say, you know, I feel anxious sometimes. Would that mean that I need to sort of seek professional help?
Look, I think it depends on, you know, the impact that anxiety is having on your life. If you think that it's on a daily basis, it's, you know, negatively impacting your ability to do what you need to do, you know, to attend your classes or to be, you know, doing the tasks that you need to manage at home. We need to look at the impact that it is having, keeping in mind, you know, that we all have periods of, you know, feeling down or experiencing anxious feelings, but it's really just evaluating that impact, and is that emotion, you know, stopping you from doing what you need to do? How much is it factoring in your day, I suppose, is what I would be recommending that you be considering.
Thank you. Lucy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Chelsea, I'm just wondering, in terms of young people and mental health conditions, you know, sort of certainly through the media, it seems that that's on the increase. From your knowledge and perspective, is it on the increase, or is there just a greater awareness and more diagnosis than there used to be?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, the latter has got a significant impact on it. You've hit the nail on the head. I think we have got such greater awareness now of mental health challenges, or perhaps what the risk factors are, and we're more tuned into those. Plus, schools are doing so much more work now on mental health literacy and promotion and promoting that awareness. So, you know, if I even think back to when I was at school, I don't even think we had a psychologist, you know, at our school, and it wasn't mental health stigma was still incredibly high. So I think we've been working incredibly hard in the last decade or so to challenge that mental health stigma. So I think that that's helped the help-seeking behaviour of a number of young people. But I do think alongside that, though, there are some elements of, you know, modern life that are making young people, you know, more at risk to some of those negative outcomes. And, you know, we're all aware of the headlines, certainly at the moment too, around COVID and the impact on, you know, sort of the middle teenage group, say 13 to 15-year-olds, and the increased presentations, you know, at emergency services for mental health reasons. So I think both. I think there are some aspects of our modern life that make it, you know, the presentation of mental health difficulties, you know, more increased, but also our awareness of diagnosis, you know, has also increased at the same time. So, yes, I suppose to both aspects that you raised there.
And so I've got children who are sort of maybe, well, they're still at primary, but heading towards those sort of teenage years. Would you say it's about sort of just keeping an eye on those 5 that you talked about today? You know, keeping channels of communication open.
Yes.
You know, focusing on meal times and family and community, and that sort of is your best shot at prevention.
Yeah, look, you know, as a parent, you're going to know your child better than anyone. So any change, you know, no matter how subtle, is going to be probably quite clear to you. But I'd just like to pick up on one of the points you said there about keeping the lines of communication open. That's critical, because we want to keep our young people talking to us and hearing, you know, what their concerns are and what they're dealing with. And the things that I've talked about today, you know, that's they're not necessarily always going to be a solution, but it's just about what are the things that we can do to try and put ourselves in a space of having good mental health, or being well resourced to deal with stresses when they appear. But I think observing your child for any, you know, drastic change in their mood or behaviour, and monitoring that, and just talking to them about what's going on is really important.
Yeah, I feel like there's that potential for young people to become overwhelmed with things like, you know, climate change, and that balancing of awareness and knowledge, but without entering the realm where people just think, well, it's hopeless, you know, we have no future, and sort of working somewhere more in the, you know, some of those global problems like this pandemic and global warming, I think, are two obvious ones, can be just overwhelming for young people.
They absolutely are. And look, from a clinical perspective, the work that I would do with young people, well, certainly in the COVID space, I've been doing over the last few months, and also young people that have got a lot of concerns around climate change, is working with them to support things that they actually can do. What are some of the, you know, strategic things, or the what can they actually do? What is within their control? How can they have an impact or an effect of what's going on? Because I think that when we feel powerless, or when we feel like we, you know, can't have any impact, that's going to increase our areas of anxiety. So definitely during the COVID space, that's been a lot of the conversation I've been having is, well, there's a lot beyond our control here, but there are things that you can do to feel like, you know, you've got a say, or you feel like you've got some control over your own immediate environment, or your own well-being, or your own, you know, behaviours that you're putting into place. We can't control lockdown restrictions necessarily, but there are some things, you know, within our control, and working with young people to identify, you know, what those things are. Yeah,
that's good to hear. We do a lot of that in our family, actually.
Good work.
That's out of our control, so we acknowledge it and put it over there, and then we think about what we can control within our family and community, and focus on that, and look at the positives and things that we can areas we can make a difference.
That's great, Lucy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Thanks, Chelsea. Does anyone else have a question for Chelsea? I think you sort of spoke a little bit about sort of stress, and I know that I am stressed all the time, but is stress always a bad thing? Out of curiosity?
No, it's not always a bad thing. It's really just about getting that balance, that, you know, that ideal zone of stress, so that it actually enhances or motivates our performance, versus stress that becomes crippling. And look at the other, I think I talked in the presentation about the inverted U, and when we get to the other end of the U, our performance goes right down, and our stress is really high, and our stress takes over. Also at the other end of the spectrum, you know, we've got, if there's no stress, then that means we've got sort of low motivation or low care factor, I suppose, which also then doesn't result in high performance. So stress really needs to be in that functional zone of indicating to us this is something we care about and need to do something about, thereby motivating us to do the work. But when stress becomes so bad that you're having, you know, very severe physiological responses, or it's having a significant impact on your sleep over a prolonged period of time, then it's becoming, you know, quite dysfunctional and not helpful to us.
Do you have sort of like I suppose like a quick fix? If say you're feeling like you're kind of getting to that point where your stress is going beyond that productive stage, do you have any suggestions on how someone can sort of, I guess first, once they acknowledge it, how to sort of take a step back to get back into that productive, not overly stressed point? Well, look, I think as you pointed out there, the key thing is acknowledging it, first of all, looking at where your stress levels are. Then the second thing, I suppose, would be, okay,
planning it all out, what is actually stressing you, writing it down and creating a list of what needs to be done, and then I suppose, you know, prioritising tasks and having a scheduled approach to what we need to do. But the other side of that, you know, the psychological side of that is looking at, okay, so I'm experiencing high stress here. Am I doing the things that I know help reduce my stress? Because I think when we're really busy, they're the first things to go out the window. You know, the daily walk or the yoga class or the meditation is the first thing that we throw out the window when we're really busy and stressed. And actually, if we give ourselves permission to do those things, we're often surprised at how stress reduces, and we're able to then, you know, move forward and be productive again. So I think all those things in balance will contribute.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Chelsea.
Just
that's
curious
really
too with the sweat category.
Yeah.
I very rarely do any exercise that sort of gets my heart rate right up.
Yeah.
I do quite a lot of walking, and I'm generally at the park just with kids playing ball games or drawing on the ground, or, you know, with the chalk and that sort of thing. Should I be looking to try to get my heart rate up a bit more? You know, I mean, if I go for a walk, it's a reasonably sort of brisk walk, but I do not run anywhere.
Yeah, look, neither am I. neither. I'm not a runner either. And look, I'm not a fitness expert. I think based on, you know, my own kind of research and understanding in the areas, I think the recommendation is that I think we should be trying to do about 30 minutes of moderate exercise if we can a day. And I think, you know, walking would fall within that category. I think, you know, if even, you know, brisk walking will get the heart rate up a little bit. It's just more about moving the body. You know, I know for me, I'm a big yoga lover, and a lot of yoga is not, you know, increasing the heart rate a lot of the time, but it's moving the body and getting it stretching, and it's also got that mindfulness and meditative aspect as well. But I think if you're at least having a walk every day, then you're putting yourself in good stead. Yeah, there's still some endorphins that are being created through that process.
With the exercise, has your research sort of found, are there better times of the day for people to be exercising, or is it just exercise in general every day at some point that sort of suits your schedule that still overall benefits the person?
Yeah, look, I think it is very much an individual thing in terms of, you know, our daily planning and just trying to do things that we know are going to be good for our mental health. If we're just looking at it from that aspect, then timing probably isn't such a big factor. You know, if we're looking at exercises for different reasons, whether that's, you know, weight loss or recuperation or anything, you know, I'm not an expert in that space, so I'm not going to comment there. But in terms of just promoting a healthy headspace, it's really what's going to work for you. You know, if you're not a morning person, then I wouldn't be setting the alarm for 6 o'clock and, you know, having the intention of doing a jog or a walk at that time, if you know that's not going to work for you. Whereas it might be at the end of the day that fits quite nicely into your wind down routine. So certainly when we're trying to change behaviours, we've got to increase our chances for success. So we've got to, you know, increase that likelihood that we're actually going to do the behaviour that we're trying to change. So, you know, set yourself up for success there. Make it
great.
Feasible. Yeah.
Thanks, Chelsea. Look, I've got one more question. I'm not sure if anyone else has any questions. Please, once again, feel free to jump in if you do. What you were talking about with sleep seems, really, really interesting. Is sleep really that important for, I guess, our mental health specifically? Yeah,
look, it really is. And the research is pretty strong on this, that we know that, you know, sleep debt, as I'll call it, you know, accumulative, you know, lack of sleep can have a detrimental impact. Well, we know that, you know, sleep deprivation is used as a form of torture, you know, to put it in the extreme. So not only has it got that restorative function and the memory consolidation function, but, you know, sleep is important for our mood and us feeling, you know, rested and restored. And sleep, you know, really does need to fall within a regular window. Our sleep-wake cycle, you know, is is meant to be regulated by the sun, you know, and the moon and the rest of, and now we've got, you know, screens and everything that we're engaging in with till, you know, late at night. And this is a big issue, I know, for teenagers, in separating from the screens and having, you know, sleep patterns that are all over the place, often becoming nocturnal during school holidays, where they're up all night and they're sleeping all day, which, you know, is going to have a negative impact when they're trying to reset back to a normal schedule. But I digress a little bit there. But sleep is, yeah, it's really important to our well-being. Well, we all know that if we have a bad night's sleep, we don't exactly feel great the next day.
Yeah,
and then if you look at the cumulative impact of that, it's going to start to have, you know, a big impact. A big
question sort of off the back of that. If somebody's been, say, looking at a screen, I understand that there's really the screen should be off for at least half an hour to an hour, say, before you're going to sleep. If that's not the case, and then the person says, oh, but I fall asleep fine, but then they're waking up later in the night, is that likely to still be an effect of that screen time? Or is that just, I mean, I know that people have sleep cycles, and then, you know, possibly often you wake up, if you do wake up in the night, that you then start thinking about things. In
terms of the delayed impact of screen, look, I can't really just say definitively there if that would be, you know, causing later waking. I suppose looking at the impact of screens is probably more critical if you feel that you know your sleep patterns aren't good, and wanting to sort of make that change there, because as you rightly point out, I think, you know, for some young people, they won't see it an issue. You know, they'll be on their phone, put it down, and 5 minutes later they're asleep. So, you know, it might not be such a big impact. But those that are waking in the middle of the night, I'd be wanting to ask questions about what's actually happened when you then wake. Is it that you're ruminating over thoughts, and so then that keeps you awake? Or is it to do with things like sleep hygiene that I mentioned earlier? Are you too hot? Is there too much light in your room? What's actually going on when you're, you know, waking up and needing to go to the bathroom? So are you drinking, you know, too many cups of tea or coffee before you go to bed? So some of those more functional hygiene aspects might come into it as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of adults are in that pattern of that they wake in the night and then start thinking about work or study or children or whatever other stress. You know, they've had enough sleep that there's some level of refreshment, and then the brain kicks in. Yeah. Have you got any sort of particular tips for dealing with that kind of night
waking?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, well, for different people, it might, you know, there might be different things that work for them. When I'm talking with students, one of the main things I'll recommend is that they do try some kind of meditation or relaxation. You know, we've all tend to have our phones in our bedroom anyway. Popping on a guided relaxation can sort of help move you back into, you know, into that space. For others, if there's a lot of tasks on your mind, and you're worried about, you know, forgetting things, then actually turning the light on, writing down those things that are bothering you might actually help you then, you know, get that rest. But look, we go through cycles of sleep through the night anyway, and unbeknownst to us most of the time, we do wake about, you know, 2 or 3 times anyway. It's just, you know, how lucid we become, so that the brain then, you know, kicks into gear and starts thinking, versus us sort of stirring, rolling over and going back to sleep. So there's probably no one solution for that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Chelsea. This has been a really incredible session. I think we've all gained some really good tips. I know I have. Yeah, so just much appreciated of all your work today. And yeah, I look forward to seeing more of your work in the future with MGSE. And thank you to everyone in the audience for coming along today. As I said at the start of the session, this session is recorded, so it will be available to watch, to rewatch at a later stage. I think it's a very good time to be listening to these tips and these sort of striving for these 5 aspects in a COVID situation. But yeah, thank you so much, Chelsea.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.